Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we are talking about springtime bass fishing with big swim baits. This is the time of year that you can catch a new PB, a new personal best. So we're gonna run through the baits, the styles, how to fish these baits, when to fish them, the best colors for you, depending on your water quality, whether you have clear water or muddy water. We're gonna cover all of it. Come along. Today we're gonna keep swim baiting simple. I'm gonna give you guys the confidence that you need to go out there and catch that new personal best. Because guys, you can do this. This is the best time of the year. These pre-spawn females come in, and before they spawn, they are bulking up and they're eating big meals. We talked recently about jig fish, and I told you that besides swim baits, jig was the best way to get that monster bass. Well, today it's time to talk about the rest. We're gonna talk about getting baits destroyed, just getting them chewed on. We're gonna keep it simple. We're gonna break this down into 4 categories. In the hard bait category, we're gonna talk about multi-jointed baits, then we're gonna talk about glide baits. Glide baits are divided into 2 groups, open water glides, cover glides. And I'll explain all that to you. And then we're talking soft baits. Let's start on the soft bait end, because we've got some tips and tricks along the way, some new baits for you that we'll wrap this up with. But starting out on the soft bait end, the way you're gonna decide what bait is right for you is based on what your bass are eating and water clarity. If you've got a clear water fishery that's got trout in it and you wanna throw a soft bait, it's pretty simple. You need to be throwing a very natural looking bait, like a Huddleston. I'm really not even gonna go that in depth into this because we've beaten this dead horse so many times. Clearwater fishing is easy. It's just a time commitment. You throw on big open water structures. You do it when the sun is up high. That might surprise you. The reason why you do it while the sun is high is because these giant trout eaters, if they're eating trout or kokanee, they're hunting open water. They want the odds to be in their favor. So when the sun is the highest, they can see the farthest. They sit low and they look up and out. That's why we're fishing open water structures, because we want to come up over the top of those fish, have them come out and ambush the bait. We're not talking about doing that ultra slow crawl down on the bottom. I'm talking about fishing those baits. Those big fish will come up and maul them. You want to do it right in the brightest part of the day. Again, it's a numbers game, because during that brightest part of the day, the fish can see the farthest and they can see you too. So take your time, long cast, cover water. We're gonna set that aside, that's done. Let's talk about the rest of the soft baits. Let's talk about when you don't have trout and kokanee, because that's the entire rest of the country. You've got shad, bait fish, bluegills, perch. It's a whole different deal. When you have that type of fishing, I have found that boot tail style baits, as opposed to a wedge style tail, work much better. See, a wedge style tail creates a very slow, very maintained action, where a boot will kick and turn. Baits will get a lot of roll to them. There's a lot more going on. When you watch small bait fish, when they kick in that water, you see a lot of kick. You see that tail back there going 100 miles an hour. This style tail will move much quicker. You get a lot more shine, a lot more roll out of these boot tail style baits. As far as bait selection, as the years have rolled by, our selection is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. The category is getting bigger. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of swim baits available on the market, and we're using very few of them. It seems like all these new baits hit, we go try them all, and we find that those tried and true baits just continue to work. But once in a while, one will stick. So just a handful of baits in this category. First one is the osprey. This is a 6-inch tournament talon osprey. This bait works coast to coast. It works in ponds, it works in giant lakes. If you've got some murkiness in your water, if you've got, say, 6 inches to 5 feet of visibility, this is a great choice. If you have crystal clear water, I tend to lean away from it. Although if you throw it in the ghostier colors, you can do extremely well even in crystal clear water. But that bait right there, 6-inch tournament talon osprey, Chartreuse shad, white, bluegill, just those basic bold colors will work all across the country on any fishery. And all you do is throw it out, start a medium retrieve. Almost like you're slow fishing a spinnerbait. Just go down the bank. There's no magic to this. Because if you're on a fishery where they're eating bluegill and bait fish, they tend to drive those into pockets before they ambush them. It's not as big of a main lake structure thing as it is with trout. So you can throw them anywhere. Don't worry about it. Just have confidence and fish it. If you're not getting bit on that faster speed, slow down and just let that bait occasionally bump the bottom. But you just want a consistent speed. That is the key. With a soft bait, there's no bumping the rod, twitching, ticking, stop and go. Don't worry about any of that. Consistent speed. Your goal is to look like a naive, dumb little fish just waiting to get eaten. So the osprey is a great option for that. 6-inch and 7-inch. This is the 7-inch. But the 7-inch is quite a bit heavier. You will need a dedicated swim bait rod for that. The 6-inch, if you're just getting into the game, you can definitely get away with it on a heavy jig rod or a flipping stick. It's not ideal, but you can definitely do it. 7-inch, you need a dedicated rod. Next one is going to be the trash fish. The two versions of the trash fish that I like the best. Tim loves that original trash fish. I like the fat version. See how wide this belly section is on this bait? This one we fish a lot slower. The trash fish is soft. See how that thing just sort of flops around? A lot of these baits are more rigid than that. See that osprey? Fairly rigid. These guys are just flopping all over the place. Very soft. What that tells me is two things. They're going to have amazing action, but you can overpower them. You don't want to overpower these baits. You want to go slow with them. So these two, these are going to be creeping baits. Throw it out, hit the bottom, slow crawl it. Super slow, just bumping along the bottom. If you've got a lot of debris and garbage to get caught on, you're going to rig it on a beast hook. If you don't, you can rig them exposed hook. And guys, like every video, open the video description. We're going to link every bait, every hook option that we're using. We'll recommend the colors. We lay it all out there for it to make it simple. You don't need to take any notes. It'll all be broken down for you. The fat, the reason why I like the fat so much is that when I am crawling bottom, it tends to stay upright a lot better. That's why I like that bait so much. Plus, it's a little more of a substantial meal than the smaller, narrower bait. I tend to get a better bite on the fat. And then the big one, same thing, just blown up. It's blown up to an 8-inch bait. This thing is deadly, and it is deadly in the southeast. Tim kind of blew the top off of that last year, and it has just continued. Guys, smash them on the 8-inch trash fish very quietly. Ledge fishing, getting out on those fish that are first coming in. You can just slow fish on bottom and pick off those big ones. It's a great option. The last soft bait we're going to talk about. See, I told you it's getting narrower. We're using less and less baits as time goes on, but one that did sneak through is the 6.8 and the 7.8 Kitech. It's rare that when a company takes a successful bait and upsizes it, that the action is maintained and it works, but the Kitech did. The 7.8 Kitech, I just rig on the biggest beast hook. That's how I fish it. The 6.8, you can rig it on a beast, or this is on my Matt Allen Swimbait head, 3/4 ounce head, and you just trim a little bit of the nose off the Kitech, just the very end of the nose. Clip it off with scissors, thread it on there, so you can fish it again. You can crawl bottom, or you can fish it up off the, either on bottom where you don't have a lot of debris, or up off the bottom, throwing it like a spinnerbait or a swim jig or anything else, just fishing fast, and they'll just come up and eat the entire bait. But that 6.8 Kitech really has found a place for us. Comes in a bunch of great colors. We all know how well Kitechs work in the smaller sizes. Works the same in the big sizes. We had a blast with this bait in the spring a couple of years ago. They were just smashing it. Moving on to hard baits. Let's talk multi-jointed baits first. Then we're going to come back and talk about the two different styles of glide baits. And then we'll wrap it up with the gear. And I want you to stick around because we're going to talk about this line too, which is a big change for me. Multi-jointed baits, two baits. They're gonna fish in a similar category. Triple trout, and this is Buka's bull shad. 7-inch seems to be perfect. And the triple trout will also go up to the 8-inch. But that 7-inch bull shad seems to be my perfect size, where I can do everything I want to do with the bait. I can get plenty of bites, but I can also draw those giant bites. Now what's neat about this category is these baits fish so differently than all the other swim baits. When you see this, you're just thinking swim bait. You think throw it out there, reel it back, cover in water. But the reality is that this is a very aggressive, very reactive bait. The way you're gonna fish this, high speed reel, fire it out, and you burn it. And then pause, burn, pause, burn, 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 pause. We did a video with Mike Buka a couple of years ago where I got the opportunity to fish with him back in Kentucky and Tennessee, and got to see firsthand his vision for the bait. Completely changed my understanding of the bait, how I fished it, what I thought it was for. It's all about high-speed fishing. So that is going to be that bait that you pull up when those fish are first moving up. They're getting aggressive, they want to feed, and they get right on the bank. When they're first coming in, you get that warm afternoon, the water warms up, those fish get dirt shallow, use it then. After they get up and they're staying up, use it low light, early and late when those fish are really aggressive, but fire it up along the bank and burn it on cover. Burn, 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 pause. Right next to a stump. Burn, 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 stop. Right next to a tree, next to a lay down, next to brush. But just burn and stop, burn and stop. It is some of the most vicious bites that you will get. Paint job, I don't even care which color you throw, because you're fishing the bait so fast and so aggressively, it almost doesn't matter what it looks like. Bold is the important thing, and that's my rule of thumb with all these hard baits. You're gonna find that bold colors matter to me. That's why when I pick up the triple trout, you see it's bone. Bold colors. The 7-inch and the 8-inch triple trout are both great sizes. Same concept. You're gonna fish them fast, stop and go, burn them, pause them. The triple trout, I can't go as fast as I can with the bull shad, but it's an incredibly consistent bait. It's another great option that we've glanced over in some of the videos in the past, but it's a bait that we've been throwing for probably 15 plus years now. Again, with these hard baits, when it comes to color, you're not going to see a single ghost colored bait on my deck. There's a time and a place for them, and there are guys that would totally disagree with me. But I've found that when I'm fishing these hard baits in the springtime, the most important thing to me is drawing power, pulling big fish the farthest distance to the bait. The farther they can see the bait, the farther they're willing to come to the bait. That's why I stay bold. That's it for multi-jointed baits, just those two. Now let's talk glides. I break my glides down into cover glides and open water glides. You've heard me say that a couple times now. I want to drill that into you. They are not the same thing. Cover glides are a whole different animal. One of the nice things about them is they're usually less expensive baits too. You don't necessarily have to have dedicated gear to throw them. They're typically smaller baits. Let's start with open water baits. The open water category, that's those big famous glide baits you've heard of. The Roman Maid Mother, the Depths 250, the Hinkle. The Bait Sanity falls into that category. So does the bigger Gancraft, the 230 Gancraft, and then so does the Waver 200. The Waver 200 is a crossover. It'll do both. The open water glides, you can spend a ton of money to get a bait that will fish well, but you don't have to. Some of these baits, they're mid-range price. I mean, they're not cheap. I mean, these baits are a commitment, but they're nothing compared to some of those really, really expensive baits. The key to me in an open water glide is finding a bait that I can get that's available. The price isn't insane, they're consistent, and they stick fish. And these three baits are gonna be the three that I turn to. Again, color, base it on your forage. So you're gonna notice I don't have a single bluegill bait out here, even though we're headed into springtime. Bluegill are their own category. Bluegill baits are their own category. That said, What I recommend doing for that big swim bait is, if they're bluegill eaters, try some of these hard baits in the bluegill type colors. If they don't make a bluegill color, get a bright bold color, something with some chartreuse, some of those brighter oranges, those colors that will pop, and when you're fishing them fairly quickly will still give off that bluegill profile. A bluegill colored hard bait rather than a bluegill shaped hard bait is going to work much more consistently, because you're going to get a better hookup ratio. A bluegill naturally is a hard shape for a bass to eat. That's why you see bass periodically choking on them, where the bass and the bluegill both die. The bass can't get them down, even in the real world. When you throw a hard bluegill bait, it's even harder for them, so your hookup ratio is terrible. They just bounce off them. They want to eat them, but they have a terrible time hooking up. When you do hook up, a lot of them shake them. So again, get a more slender profiled bait in more of a bluegill type color. You're gonna find they'll still eat it. You have a way better hookup ratio. Bluegill soft baits, you can get away with some of them, but there aren't a lot of baits in that category that swim well. Probably the mat lures is the only one that I think has a consistent hookup and a consistent action, and a great swim that those fish will consistently eat. Some of the others, there's not enough consistency there, so I really stay away from them and just stick to traditional shapes, but in more of a bluegill color. Back to the hard baits. The three baits, the bait Sanity, we talked about that bait a bunch. Has this amazing wide glide, like some of those really expensive open water baits, for a less crazy price than the Gancraft. The Gancraft is a very refined bait. I went through, a couple of years ago, I had some that were sinking. That all seems to have been fixed now. My last 3 or 4 didn't take on any water. They fish perfectly. The Gancraft, all these baits I replace my hardware. I upgrade all my hardware. Again, we'll link that in the video description. Because again, we're talking personal best, your biggest bass ever. You're not trying to catch small fish here. You want giant fish. So even if you spend 50 or 80 or 100 bucks on a bait, double check the hardware and make sure that you don't want to change it out. Go into double split rings on a bait that has hard hangers, allows you much freer range of motion so that fish doesn't come up and shake that bait. Some baits like this one, they're gonna have swivels in them. That's awesome. Some baits don't. And if you don't have double rings, you don't turn very far before they're bound up. The fish, when they come up thrashing, can shake that bait out. So double rings is a great option. Gets those hooks lower, gives you free range of motion, you'll land more of your fish. Then again, the last one in that open water category, crossover bait, is the S-Waver 200. The reason why I call it a crossover, it's a wide enough glide to be an open water bait, but a tight enough glide to fish it in cover. And then again, colors, guys, bold colors. Even my trout colors, these aren't plain, clear, ghosty trouts. I mean, they are crazy, bold, bright, obnoxious colors. The idea is that the fish see them from farther away. You're catching them because of action, not color. Action over color. The color is there to get those fish lured in. If you're on a crystal clear trout lake, different animal. You need to be natural because you have to fool those fish. But that is such a small part of the country. The rest of you guys, color just gets them close. They've never seen this action before. There's not guys throwing all these baits in every lake all over this country yet. You may very well be the first guy, or at least it's extremely rare that someone's doing it. So don't worry about it. Light trout, hands down, Tim and I both, that's our favorite color. That does not look like a trout. It doesn't look like anything that swims in any of our lakes. It's our best color all over the country. We've caught giant smallmouth on it, giant largemouth, giant spots. Everything eats it because they see it from farther away. I think I've beat on that enough now. Now let's talk about cover glides. 3 baits in that category. What makes a cover glide over an open water glide? Well, an open water glide is this giant, slow swim. And you can twitch them. You can get that action out of them. But they just don't do it well, as a rule. They just are not that, they don't get those great kicks to them. You're just relying on the fish to see it, and because it's doing this slow, wide glide, they come out into open water and they get behind it and they hunt it and they eat it. You can twitch them, but it's still gonna be wide glides, even on the twitch. And we'll circle back around when I talk gear, and I'll give you the cadence for these glide baits. Now, cover glides, whole different animal. The action's tighter, and because you're fishing around cover, you're not trying to draw the fish out as far. You don't need that big glide. What you need is tight action and tight aggressive movements, so that when you do pull them out, you can get that reaction bite out of them. So 3 baits in this category. Talk about the main one first, that S-Waver 168 light trout color. The S-Waver 168 is the one bait that we don't go anywhere without. I mean, every trip I go on, whether I'm traveling to my home lake, whether I'm headed down the road 50 miles, whether I'm going 8 hours, whether I'm flying to Michigan, whether we're flying down south, we always have an S-Waver 168. It'll fit in a regular Plano box with the rest of your tackle. You can throw it on a regular rod, and it catches irregular fish. It catches giant bass everywhere we go. It worked awesome in Mexico in light trout. There are no trout down there. They don't have anything that even remotely looks like this catching giant fish on it. You've got to understand, again, I said I wouldn't beat the dead horse. I lied. Don't worry about color. It's all about drawing power. So the 168, super tight action. That bait is not this big wide glide. That's not what you're getting out of this bait. You're getting an action like this. Nice and tight. And then we give it our twitches, and that bait, and then comes back. That's about all you get. So the way you're gonna fish it, is you're gonna pick a piece of cover. If I'm going down the bank and I see a stump, a rock, a tree, some tules, some debris, some junk, throw it right up near it. Swim up to the object, nice and slow. Right as you get to the object, 2 twitches, tick, tick, and then continue. That's it. When you do that, you're gonna swim up to your object. That's where your bass is, you assume, up against a piece of cover. Right as you get there, you kick out, kick back. The fish, when they see that thing coming, they're thinking, I've got the upper hand on this. It doesn't know that I'm here. When that bait kicks, that tells that bass, I'm busted. And that fish is either gonna eat or let it go. One or the other. If they eat, they're gonna hit it hard because you're right there close quarters. If they let it go, no harm, no foul, you're on to your next cast. Now, if you don't have super tight cover, the way that we fish that smaller bait, I said I wouldn't talk about it yet, I guess we're jumping ahead. The smaller bait, 4 handle turns, 2, 3, 4, 2 twitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 twitches. You can do that up to 8 or 10 handle turns and as low as 4. What that does, it gives the fish time where it has that slow, methodical action. That's what lures them in. Gives them time to follow that, and then the twitches are there to fool them. The bigger baits, you're gonna do a lot more. 6 to 10, maybe 8 to 10 slow handle turns. Keep in mind, those baits have that bigger glide. Big wide glides. And then when you wanna twitch them, it's much softer. These little baits, they're just gonna dart. The big ones, if you snap that rod tip on them, they roll over. And if you had a follower, it's over. So all you can do is just barely tick that rod and give it a little bit of slack. And instead of doing its natural glide, it'll just follow that path out a little bit farther. That's how you try and lure those fish. But back to the cover glides, tight action, the sharp little twitches, that thing will kick and they're on it. The other two, the Gancraft 178, we've talked about that bait a lot. Just a little more refined, more natural paint schemes. If you're in crystal clear water, that might be something that appeals to you, but that is another great bait. And then this one is the Sneaky Pete. That's a bait that we just started fiddling around with, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. Now they do it in a plastic version. It used to be a resin bait. Price came down. These are totally affordable now, just like an S-Waver. I mentioned they've got swiveling hook hangers in them, heavy duty gear on the inside. I mean, they take a beating, but what's nice, again, is you're talking about a cover glide. Very tight action. You're not talking about a big wide swim. You're not talking about an open water bait here. Nice tight action and good hard snapping kicks. Perfect in and around cover. It's got a little bit of sound to it too. Just like that waver's got just a little bit of sound to it. Just a little bit. These baits make a little bit of ruckus. You're not trying to fool a 15-pound bass in 40 feet of crystal clear water. That's not what these are about. These are fooling your 4 to 12 pounders. Nothing wrong with a 12 pounder. Fooling those 4 to 12 pound fish that you would just hope and pray that you could have in a tournament, and you're doing it in clear water, chocolate milk water, murky water, in and around cover, up under boat docks, all those places that we all really fish. Those little cover glides will kill it. It's that easy. It really is that easy. That's not very many baits, because again, it's only 4 styles, and you don't need every bait in every category. So think about the categories that apply to you. Are you on a trout lake? You're looking at a bait like a Huddleston. You're looking at a big open water glide bait. Are we talking tight to cover, murky water? Then you're talking about a bait that you can burn and a little cover glide and a bold little paddle tail swim bait. It's that easy. Now rods, your smaller baits, you can get away with a jig rod. Anything in like the 7.2 to 7.6 heavy action. You don't want a flipping stick. You don't want a pool cue, because again, once you hook them up, you got them on treble hooks. So you still need a little bit of bend. So a heavy action's perfect. That's also why I go that little bit longer. That's why I'm not using a 7-foot rod. 7.2 to 7.6, you're gonna get a little bit more tip bend out of that rod. It's gonna load up a little bit deeper. I fish them all on braid to leader. Typically 65-pound braid, and then I adjust my leader from there. 15 to 20-pound leader is how I'm fishing most of those smaller cover glides. And then you just step up from there. The bigger baits, and we're gonna come back to that line in just a second. The bigger baits, the giant soft bait, like the Huddleston and larger, I'm still throwing on that Dobbins 807 mag. I've gone round and round trying to find different rods for every category. I keep coming back to that rod. It's just a really good, large soft bait rod. The rest of them, literally every other bait I have here, from the 6 to the 8-inch soft baits, all the medium to large glide baits, I'm throwing on this rod. This is a Loomis. It's a 966 limber rod. Basically, think of it as like a giant crankbait rod. It's a swim bait stick. It's got a ton of backbone, but they're more moderate, so they load really deep into the blank, and they keep those fish penned really well. And then I fish them on a high-speed reel. Still a swim bait reel. This is a Tranx 300, but in a 7-to-1, so that when I do want to be aggressive with those baits and cover water, I can. Then if I need to slow down, I can creep. Again, we'll link all that down in the video description. You can also use, if you're on a budget, that Fury 806, awesome swim bait rod that's more like this, that more parabolic loading up action at a really affordable price. Line, I mentioned that I'm using braid to leader. Almost all of you already know that. Some guys swear by mono. Some guys swear by straight fluoro. Some guys swear by braid to leader. You've got to find the right thing for you, but I'm telling you, we've been doing this now for way too many years. I've done all those things. Braid to leader, I stand behind it in every application. The guys that are losing fish because they're breaking braid don't understand braid. They're using too light a line. They're using 20, 30, 40, 50-pound braid when they should be using heavy braid. It's not about the fish. Obviously, you don't need 50-pound or 100-pound line to catch a 5-pound bass. But when you're throwing a great big hard bait and it's sailing through the sky and you get a backlash and everything snaps tight, if you have light braid, braid cuts braid. But if you have heavy braid, 65 or higher, that problem goes away. I use almost exclusively 65 and 80 pound braid for my swim bait applications. Not because I need 80 pound braid, but because I have not one time ever broken it on a backlash, nor have any of my clients. You gotta understand, I've got guys coming on and off the boat every day that have never thrown a swim bait. I mean, some of these backlashes are spectacular, and we're not losing baits. So just upsize the braid. And then I've always been braid to mono. I've advocated for that for so long. I'm not afraid of mono. I'm not afraid of the visibility. I won't use mono as a main line. There's too much stretch, too much give, too much memory. But as a leader, it's phenomenal and it's pretty cheap. Maxima 30 pound is what I use for all the giant baits. Smaller baits, 20 pound. It's that simple. I connect them with a 9 loop blood knot. Cross your lines, 9 loop up each direction, then crisscross back through center. And we have videos teaching all of this already, but I want to recap it for you. This line I am very, very excited about. I have been fishing this now for 2 years and have been waiting to tell you. I love mono as a leader. I hate fluorocarbon as a leader. All my friends that come back and are like, Matt, I can't do it. I can't do the braid to leader thing. I think you're crazy. I break off. I break my fluoro all the time. And I say, when did I ever tell you to throw fluoro? Never. I hate fluoro as a leader material. Fluoro doesn't handle shock well. It shatters. It explodes. It works great as a main line. It's very sensitive, lower stretch. It's clear. It's harder for the fish to see. But mono is the shock absorber. Mono is the natural leader material. Well, that said, I'm always looking. We always want to find the best of the best of the best. Starting 5 or 6 years ago, I started playing with shock leaders, which is a thing that comes over from saltwater. See, when bass fishermen talk about fluorocarbon, we're talking about low stretch, lines that are brittle, but they're very crisp. But they make a whole different kind of fluorocarbon. It's clear, like fluoro. It's thin, like fluoro. You see that's 35 pound? 35 pound, but it's thin. That's what I throw my glides on now. 35 pound, but it's thinner than the mono I used to use. So I never have issues. From bass to enormous striper to everything in between, it works so well. So again, I've been doing this for years and years and years. I had not found a workable solution because almost all of them, it's a small category, shock leader. When you could find it, you'd order it off the internet and it would show up and be dusty. And it's been on a shelf for who knows how long. But this one I've got 2 years into now. I'm very confident in it. You're gonna pay more than you are for mono, but it's clear. It is fluorocarbon, it's clear, but it has amazing stretch. And it returns, meaning I don't retie my leaders as often. I'm typically only throwing 1 leader a day, even when I'm sticking fish. Because when you catch a big bass and you get them in the boat and you look at your leader, it'll be all sprung and has curly cues in it. You cut that off and tie a new leader. I change mono leaders all the time. The fluoro, it's designed to stretch and come back, so I don't have to retie them as much. And again, I can upsize. I'm using everything from 18 pound on up, but for my biggest baits, 35 is my main gig. For my smaller baits, 20 to 25 is where you want to be, because again, it's smaller, it's clearer, you get all the benefits of fluoro with all the benefits of mono. It's awesome. I think right now that is as far as we can take our line system. I mean, you guys don't know how much Tim and I experiment. We never talked to you about it in the videos. We fiddle with line constantly, trying to find the best deal. And then when we find something that's good like this, I keep my mouth shut for 2.5 years while I'm catching fish, going back and forth. Every day I have both of them tied on, just to be sure that I'm sure that it's great stuff. I still love mono. I mean, that is still tied on mono. I was throwing this when Derek and I were out the other day. You guys saw that video with Derek that lost his leg. This is what I was using, mono. I still use it all the time. But especially if there's a tournament situation or really clear water where every little advantage will help you, shock leader is awesome, and you guys should try it. Heavier braid. Giant swim baits, I'm just gonna say 80-pound braid. 65 is okay. 80 is even better. Tie it to 30+ pound shock leader, or if you're going mono, tie to 30 pound. It's bomb proof. And I'm just gonna tell you, the fish don't care. This isn't finesse fishing. This isn't the bass staring at the worm on the bottom and following it along and then noticing the line. This is a bass sitting down low and a huge meal comes by, swimming past them. They see the meal. They don't look ahead of the meal. They see the meal and they either eat it or they don't. Don't get caught up with the line. But if you're in a tournament situation, put all the odds in your favor. If you're a giant bass guy, a true giant bass guy, put all the odds in your favor. I think that system leader is going to help you a lot, because it's been helping us a lot. And I finally stuck enough fish that I was willing to say, yeah, I like it. Because I tried a bunch of them. This particular one is made by Sunline. I don't know how many different shock leaders I tried, and I found 2 that were good, but I couldn't get them. I could never get them. And Sunline is finally stocking this stuff. You can get your hands on it. It's available. Makes all the difference in the world. Guys, this is probably one of the longest videos we have ever done, so I'm gonna wrap it up right here. This is your time of year to catch a new personal best. You can do it. Focus on giant baits. Focus on jigs. You can do this. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.